It was the night of my wedding, and I was overwhelmed with happiness. My greatest desire had been fulfilled. Maham was the girl for whom I had stood against the entire world just to marry her. My family, especially my mother, was completely against this marriage. But after a great struggle, I managed to convince them, because I couldn't imagine even a moment of life without Maham. Ever since my mother found out that I loved Maham, her attitude towards me changed. She stopped speaking to me properly, stopped eating and drinking normally. I tried countless times to explain to her that Maham was a good girl, but she would always give me strange looks and say, "Everything looks perfect from afar. She seems good to you now because she's still in her mother's home." I never really understood what my mother meant by that. Many times I told her, "Mother, whoever you choose as a daughter-in-law, how will you even know what kind of person she is? Maham is someone I know and love. She will care for you dearly. She will love you." At that, my mother would burst into laughter and say, "Forget about my love and care. You better start worrying about yourself." Ever since I mentioned Maham's name, my mother intensified her search for other girls. One day, she sat down in front of me with a photograph and said, "She's perfect. I will get you married to her." Hearing that, I became furious and raised hell in the house. I told my mother, if not Maham, then no one. Maham wasn't a stranger. She was my aunt's daughter, my paternal aunt. We had always had good relations with her. She was a very kind and loving woman, and Maham was just like her. Whenever my aunt visited us, she would be extremely respectful to my mother. I had personally seen my aunt serve my father with great devotion. My father often used to visit her in the evenings. Then, after his death, our ties weakened, but our love didn't. My aunt still treated us with the same affection. But when the topic of marrying Maham came up, I don't know what flaws my mother suddenly started seeing. I was firm on my decision, while on the other side, Maham was threatening to take her own life. One night, while talking to Maham on the phone, I stepped out of my room and heard voices coming from my mother's room. When I went near, I heard her telling my sister, "The game your aunt has been playing all her life will not continue anymore. I've already lost so much. I have no strength left now. It was your father's last will that I should not turn away from his family, which is why I tolerated this mother and daughter. But I never knew they'd be so cunning that they'd trap my son." I ended the call with Maham and entered the room. Seeing me, my mother fell silent. I angrily asked her, "What is it that you hate Aunt so much for? If father were alive today, I wouldn't have had to struggle this much for this marriage. He would have gone to ask for Maham's hand himself." Hearing me, my mother looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said, "Yes, if your father were alive, your marriage to Maham would have happened. And your aunt would be living in this house too." Her words made no sense to me. She would never fully explain anything, nor would she agree to the marriage. I sat at her feet, folded my hands, and begged, "Mother, please let me marry Maham. If not, I'll go abroad and never return." Hearing this, my mother looked at me in pain. For 2 days, the house was completely silent. Then on the third day, my sister told me that mother had gone to aunt's house to ask for Maham's hand. I was overwhelmed with joy and hugged my sister. She said, "Look, Murad, if mother had refused, there must have been a reason. Now it's your responsibility to handle everything properly." I immediately told her, "Don't worry at all. Maham listens to everything I say. She bows her head to me. She's madly in love with me. She'll take care of mother very well. This house won't just gain a daughter-in-law, it will gain a daughter. And besides, you are only here for a few more days. Once you leave, mother will be alone again. That's why it's good that Maham will come and become her support." My sister smiled and placed her hand on my head. She had gotten married and moved to another city to live with our aunt, and she was only here for a few days to visit. Perhaps it was her influence that finally convinced my mother. Otherwise, her attitude made it clear that she would never have accepted Maham as her daughter-in-law. The proposal was finalized. Maham assured me that I would never face any trouble because of her, and I had complete faith in our love. Then came the most beautiful night of my life. The night Maham entered my home as my bride. Before I went to my room, my mother called me to her. She took out a box from her wardrobe and handed it to me. "This is my jewelry," she said, "which I had kept for my daughter-in-law. But I don't know why I couldn't bring myself to give it to Maham on the wedding day." "Now you give it to your wife yourself." Even then, there was still some disapproval on her face. I said, "She's my wife now. She's this home's daughter-in-law. Mother, please accept her with all your heart. She replied, You'll find out soon enough why I was against this marriage. Saying that, she turned away, and I went to my room. But my heart was heavy. I kept thinking, if only Mother were happy in my happiness, tonight would have become truly unforgettable. But my mother's words proved absolutely true. Not in a few days. I understood it all on the very first night of marriage. When I entered the room, Maham was sitting dressed as a bride. My heart was overflowing with emotion. When the girl you love becomes your wife, life takes on a new color. Everything felt changed. I gave Maham not only her traditional wedding gift, but also handed over the jewelry my mother had given me. Maham didn't even glance at any of it. I complimented her and reached out to touch her, but she moved away. Then she made a condition for our relationship that felt like the sky had crashed on my head. I could never have imagined my wife making such a demand on our wedding night. I stared at her in disbelief and then said, You know what you're asking is completely inappropriate. I won't do such a thing. Maham smiled and said, If you don't accept my condition, then you know what I'll do. And then she said something that completely shook me to my core. That my wife would treat me so terribly on the very first night of marriage. I had never imagined. Her demand, her attitude, it was all unbelievable. The same girl who used to beg me to marry her, who promised eternal love, showed me the stars on the first night itself. I didn't have the strength to accept her condition, especially one like that. I silently stood up, took off my turban, tossed it on the bed, and walked out of the room. My sister saw me and asked, Murad, where are you going? I glanced at her but said nothing. I walked out of the house. How could I tell her what my wife wanted from me? I was too ashamed to even think about it, let alone speak of it. I got on my motorcycle and just rode into the night, down the empty streets, directionless. My mind and heart were in a storm. Everything my mother had tried to say in hints and signs, I now understood it all. After riding aimlessly for a long time, I finally stopped and sat down by the roadside. I had no idea what to do or what decision to make. It felt like a choice between a well and a ditch. I knew I would regret it either way, whether I accepted Maham's condition or not. 2.5 hours passed like that. Then I finally got up and went back home. My sister and mother were still sitting in the lounge. As soon as they saw me, my sister came to me and hugged me. Where did you go, Murad? You didn't even take your phone. Your wife locked the door too. We were so worried about you. As soon as she saw my face, my mother immediately asked, Is something wrong, Murad? Did you have a fight with Maham or is it something else? There was a tone of foresight in her voice, as if she already understood what could have happened. I sat down at her feet and burst into tears. Seeing me cry, both my mother and sister became worried. My sister began to console me. What's the point of crying? Whatever the issue is, tell us, everything will be fine. But I didn't say a word. My wife already didn't like either of them. If I had told them about the disgusting condition Maham had placed before me, she would have fallen from their hearts forever. I wiped my tears and lied, saying I was just missing father a lot. If he had been alive today, he would have shared in my joy. They weren't entirely convinced, but at least the questioning stopped. I returned to my room. Maham was sleeping peacefully on the bed as if nothing mattered to her. For the first time, I felt disgusted by her face and beauty. Her dark side had been revealed to me. I glanced at her once, then went and lay on the sofa. All my dreams had turned to dust. This marriage now felt like nothing but a curse. What she wanted from me was something I simply could not, under any circumstances, do. The next morning, I was awakened by Maham's loud shouting. I shot up in panic. She was yelling angrily, Sanbad Tanam. At whom I didn't know. When I looked up, I saw her clothes hadn't been ironed. She was screaming for my sister. When will my clothes be ironed? I'm a new bride. I need to get ready. My family is coming. No one here even cares. Seeing Maham speak to my sister like that set me on fire from inside. Maybe she was still venting the frustration from last night. I said in a firm tone, How are you talking to my sister? Before Maham could respond, my sister raised her hand to silence me. It's okay, she said gently. It was my mistake. I forgot to iron her clothes. She's a new bride. It won't look good if she does the housework herself. My sister took Maham's clothes and began ironing them right there in the room. Because she was present, I kept my mouth shut. But in my heart, I wanted to slap Maham across the face. Before the wedding, she couldn't stop praising me. Her voice used to barely leave her throat. Now, on the very first day of marriage, she was treating my family like her personal servants. After my sister finished ironing and left the room, I followed her and apologized. She smiled and said, "It's all right, I really did forget." I felt a deep affection for my sister. Any other woman would have gotten angry or left the house after such treatment from a new bride. But my sister was wise and always handled matters with patience and ease. I returned to the room. I grabbed Maham by the arm and asked her, "What kind of behavior was that? Don't you have any manners or respect?" Maham looked at me with hatred and said, "All I did was make a small request, just one condition." "Don't you love me enough to agree to just one thing?" I replied, "You know what you're asking is wrong. How can I, as a man, do something like that? You know it's sinful. If you had said this before the marriage, I would never have married you." She gave a bitter smile and said, "Before marriage, you made so many promises. Have you forgotten them now? Now that it's time to fulfill them, you're suddenly talking about right and wrong? When you used to talk to me all night expressing your feelings, wasn't that wrong too?" She pulled her arm away and stood in front of the dressing table getting ready. I was left speechless. The way she answered everything made it clear to me why my mother had tried to stop this marriage. My mother had probably seen through Maham's true nature already. It was I who had been blinded by love. But what surprised me most was that I had never noticed any of this before. There had never been any signs that Maham would turn out like this after marriage. Maham's family came, but I didn't go to meet them. She had breakfast and left with my aunt on her own. In the evening, my mother said, "Go and bring Maham back. We have the wedding dinner tonight, and she needs to go to the salon too." At my mother's insistence, I forced myself and went to Maham's house, but she repeated the same thing. If I agreed to her condition, only then would she return with me. I felt like the ground beneath me had slipped away. I had never imagined she would bring this up again, especially at such a time. I couldn't bring myself to tell my mother, but I did call my aunt and told her what Maham wanted. After hearing me, my aunt lowered her head and said, "Son, every woman has this desire, but women suppress it because they know that men will reject it, calling it sinful. But should we women always silence our hearts because of that?" My husband didn't fulfill my wish either. On our wedding night, I told him what I wanted, but he said the same thing, that it's wrong. I spent my entire life suppressing my desire, and sometimes I would even tell your father how much pain I was in. But he was helpless because of your mother, so he never fulfilled my longing. But now I want you to fulfill my daughter's wish, so that her heart may find peace. Her words blew my mind. I couldn't believe she not only knew what Maham wanted, but also supported her. Now I finally understood what my mother had meant that night while speaking to my sister. When Maham refused to return home under any condition, I told her for the time being, "All right, I'll fulfill your wish tonight. But for now, come home. We have the wedding dinner." Upon hearing that, she happily came back with me. The event passed peacefully, but I had no intention of agreeing to her demand. That night, instead of going to my room, I went to my mother's room and sat down at her feet. She gently ran her hand through my hair and asked, "What's wrong, son? You look worried. Is everything all right?" I had made up my mind. I would tell my mother the entire truth. Only she could find a solution or make a better decision. What Maham wanted was forbidden, and I could not agree to it under any circumstances. With hesitation and avoiding her eyes, I told her about Maham's immoral demand, the very one that had shaken me to the core. Mother stayed silent for a long time. Tears welled up in my eyes. I said, "You were right, Mother. I made the wrong choice." My sister had also come into the room. She had heard everything. She said, "Just agree to Maham's request. I don't want your marriage to fall apart. I don't want your life to be ruined." I looked at my sister in disbelief. "You know what she wants. Do you really think this will bring peace to my life? If she can demand something like this on the very first night, who knows what else she'll want in the future? If I give in now, she'll crush me under her feet for the rest of my life. My mother, who had been quiet for a long time, finally sighed deeply and said, "Son, sometimes to save relationships, a person has to swallow a bitter pill. Just agree to what she wants." There was now a certain softness in my mother's tone. Perhaps because Maham was now my wife and my life was tied to her. Only 2 nights had passed since the wedding, and if Maham had left at such a time, the world would have blamed my character. I shook my head and said, "No, mother, it's not possible. I will not do such a thing." I got up and returned to the room. Maham was sitting there waiting for me. She smiled and said, "So, did you talk to your mother? Did you tell her you're going to fulfill my wish?" At her words, I laughed bitterly and said, "That's your illusion, that I will fulfill this wish of yours. If it were lawful, I would have considered it. But what you're asking is completely impermissible, for me to transfer my father's house in your name and snatch my mother and sister's share. According to Islamic law, my mother and sister have just as much right to my father's inheritance as I do. If this house were only mine, I would have happily written it in your name. But I cannot deprive my mother and sister of their rights. Matters of inheritance are extremely delicate. They carry great religious importance. I cannot simply steal their rights. I'll have to answer for it on the day of judgment. I'll have to face my father. He entrusted me with this house, made me the custodian of its documents. That doesn't mean I can gift it away. I understand that having your own home is your right. Every woman has the full right to a secure life from her husband. Right now, I can get you a rented house, but not this one. I didn't know how your mother troubled my uncle all his life for a house and tried to get my grandfather's house in her name. But my uncle and my father were both kind and pious men. They never made any unjust decision. In fact, my father distributed the inheritance according to Islamic law and even gave our paternal aunt her rightful share. Your mother never wanted that. She didn't want our aunt to receive anything. My mother only told me this recently when your demand became clear. If you want to live in this house, you can. And if you want a separate home, I'll arrange a rented one in a few days, but I cannot and will not give you this house through injustice or illegitimate means." After hearing this, Maham picked up her things and left in anger. Days passed. I thought she would come back on her own, that she would realize what she was doing, but instead she sent divorce papers, clearly saying she couldn't live with someone like me. I signed them and silently moved on with life. After a short while, my mother found a girl for me and got me married. She was from a very noble and decent family. She won everyone's heart with her service and love as soon as she arrived. Very soon, thanks to her blessings, my job improved so much that I paid my sister her full share. My mother lived with me, so I deposited her share in the bank. Thus, the entire house became mine on its own. As for Maham, after taking the divorce, she never got married again. Everyone was aware of my aunt's nature. She still lives at her mother's house. I've heard her condition is very poor. She often cries and regrets what happened, but now nothing can be done. I've moved on with my life, and I'm thankful to God for blessing me with a wife like Fatima. Sometimes I think I made the right decision at the right time. Had I bowed to Maham's first threat and transferred the house to her name, she might have treated me like a servant for life. I only did what the religion instructs, and I feel it's because of that obedience that such beauty entered my life.